Well, before he was elected, Donald Trump committed himself to making sure Iran never got nuclear weapons. He also committed himself to not dragging America into any more of those forever wars. But those two commitments are not mutually exclusive. The question now being asked, though, is has Donald Trump changed his tune now the mullahs in Iran are on their knees? Trump hinted on his social media platform today that he might expand US involvement from eradicating the nuclear sites to achieving regime change. He wrote, and I quote, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?" Joining me now is foreign editor for The Australian, Greg Sheridan. Greg, can Trump resist the temptation to go beyond these limited targeted strikes and attempt to overthrow the Iranian regime completely?
Well, great to be with you, James. Yeah, I think you don't want to get too caught up in Trump's tweets, really. This was the most limited action you could possibly take. I think the B-2 bombers were over Iran for 25 minutes. They delivered a crippling blow to the Fordo facility and to Natanz and to Isfahan, although that came from the submarines. Trump's administration all day was saying we're not interested in regime change. But of course, everybody would love regime behaviour to change. And if the Iranian people were able to, somehow or other get rid of the dictators who ruin their lives today and put in somebody more reasonable, that'd be great. But there's no sign at all. I mean, regime change means that you kill the leaders of the current regime or you capture them and you install somebody else. That's what the United States did with Iraq in 2003. There's not the slightest evidence that Trump or indeed Netanyahu plans anything like that. Even Andrew Hastie, for whom I have the greatest admiration, was talking about, what happens if there's an Iranian collapse and there'll be refugees all over Europe and so on. Well, there's not the slightest indication that anything the United States or Israel is doing could lead to that. So I think Trump is needling the Iranians and trying to put them under a bit of pressure. But, you can't just flip a switch and say regime change. These regimes are pretty tenacious.
Iran's foreign minister said last night he'd be meeting with Vladimir Putin today. In fact, he's at the Kremlin right now. Meanwhile, Putin's Deputy Security Council head, Dmitry Medvedev, threatened that several nations would be prepared to supply Iran with nuclear weapons. What do you make of all of that?
Well, it's a very disturbing statement indeed. I don't think it's literally true. So Medvedev has always been a kind of a glove puppet of Putin's. He was briefly president when Putin, was observing the rudiments of constitutional law and stood down because of term limits and became prime minister, and Medvedev was his puppet president. Since then, Medvedev has not been that influential at the heart of Russian government, and Putin uses him sometimes to say extreme things. Nonetheless, he is in the high in the Russian government, and this is an extraordinarily disturbing statement. I write about it in The Australian tomorrow. He also says that he seems to rip off all pretense that Iran had peaceful intentions with its nuclear program. He says the production of nuclear weapons now will not be affected by US strikes. So these are very strange statements. It is true that both Russia and China had helped Iran with its nuclear program previously. Certain key technologies, the converter which converts uranium into highly enriched nuclear fuel, came from China. And I don't think China or Russia will give Iran nuclear warheads, but it could well give them, again, nuclear technology in order to hurt America. And we should always recognise the nature of the authoritarian regimes we're dealing with: Russia, China, North Korea and Iran. They help each other and they have a shared hatred of us.